again, and welcome to the Author Roundup. This special segment of the Book Connection Show showcases emerging indie authors who join us for a discussion of their newly published books. Join us for a conversation with our next guest author. Hi there, welcome to Author Roundup. My name is Emma and I will be your host for today's episode. Thank you for being here today. I have a special guest with me. His name is Larry Hartmann. He is a visionary entrepreneur and the CEO of ZRG Partners, a global leader in talent advisory and executive search. Larry has scaled 2 businesses from startup through sale and has some interesting insights on leadership to share with us. Hi, Larry. How are you today? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Emma. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So you recently published a book called 7 Pillars of Inspired Leadership. Can you tell us a little bit about your book that you published?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, the 7 Pillars of Inspired Leadership, it's a story-driven guide for leaders who want to build something meaningful and not just profitable. So, I wrote it from the perspective of an entrepreneur, CEO, and someone who believes that leadership is really about influence, not just title. And so each pillar kind of reflects a principle I've lived and learned the hard way from, we'll talk about casting vision, building trust, investing in people, embracing setbacks, it's leadership for a new world. So the structure of the book's kind of interesting. For each pillar, I share my journey in scaling 2 businesses, and I draw on some of the great leaders from the business and sports world and how that can kind of tie into the pillar. And then lastly, I think looking at the legendary leadership of Jesus around that pillar, which whether you're a believer or not, you can certainly draw from the amazing leadership lessons that he taught. So that's kind of the context of the book.
Okay. And so what inspired you to actually write a book about this and also take the route that you went as a story? Was there a specific moment or realization that led you to put your leadership philosophy into a published book?
Yeah, I mean, I get asked to speak on the topic of leadership. I get asked a lot to mentor leaders, to help people in that journey. And so, as I've spent time just in those sessions, kind of trying to say what wisdom could I share that would be helpful to other leaders in whatever part of the journey they're in. It kind of came through that. And so I just thought, you know what, it's an opportunity to capture some of the thoughts I had through the fortunate success I've had in scaling 2 businesses. So, I think it was really to bring together the thoughts in a way that could be shared with more than half a dozen of leaders that I work with on a one-on-one basis in terms of that type of development work.
Yeah. And did you, I mean, obviously there's a lot of leadership books out there, but your perspective is very, unique. And was there maybe like a setback where you're like, oh, well, there's so many like leadership books out there where you're like, my perspective is important, mine's different, and I want to, put this out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it goes back to my story. I mean, I
Yeah.
think in some ways I have a unique path in that I started 2 businesses from scratch, literally startups. And those startups grew and scaled, and both are, ended up being, a couple $100 million ventures that, employ today 600-700 people around the world. And so, part of it, as I had this unique entrepreneurial journey that I thought would be interesting to share. The second
Yeah.
part was we work with ZRG with leadership. We place senior leaders across industry, across sports, across all factions of the spectrum of business and industry. And so we get
Yeah.
exposed to great leaders. We get exposed to companies that are leading companies. So I had that view to add to it. And then the third part of it was just my looking at great leaders. It certainly drew me to the leadership of Jesus and looking at the Christian faith as kind of a startup business. It really could
Yeah.
started and scaled into multi-billion followers, with
Yeah.
lots of capital. And that what could we see that goes in Jesus's teachings that goes beyond just traditional servant leadership, which is certainly one of the things people always draw from the leadership of Jesus. So I just thought it was an interesting way to come look at the three dimensions of leadership through the pillars, and I found some insights I don't think that really have been drawn out of
Yeah.
that experience. So.
Yeah. And is this something that you like the relation to Jesus? Is this something that started when you were like writing your book and it sparked, or is this something that you thought out about since you were, younger, starting these businesses and having that entrepreneurial mindset?
No, I think it was ironically probably more of a look back. I mean, I think I
Okay.
spent years growing businesses and trying to do it in an honorable way with integrity and
Yeah.
treat
Yeah.
people with kindness and respect. And there are certain principles of leadership that I had that certainly I think any leader's journey you grow through time and you
Yeah.
learn mistakes you certainly gain a lot of wisdom from. But then as I looked at those pillars and said, how could I see, parallels within great business leaders that are out there like a Bill Gates or an Elon Musk or a Jack Welch, and then looking at sports legends that have led teams to victory. That was interesting. But then the third part was it was I think kind of really encouraging to see that some of the principles that were within me were actually found in studying some of the leadership of the Christian church and Jesus,
Yeah.
which was kind of fun. Uh,
Yeah. Um, well, can you walk us through briefly through the seven pillars and why each one is essential for building a lasting and impactful legacy?
Absolutely. So, yeah, the first pillar starts, I think, really with casting a vision. I think any business or venture has to have a vision. And I saw that in terms of scaling two businesses. You know, and I always found, today our vision is with ZRG is we're aspiring to be a disruptive player in a market, build $1 billion business, and casting a vision of what we can be. So I always found that leaders can get people to buy into what you're gonna be, not where you are today. And I've seen that through starting businesses when you're small and four people, you have to sell people on we're gonna be something bigger, join that something bigger. So I've always sold the next
Yeah.
step. And I think when you look at, vision within the industry, I mean, Amazon, great vision, anything you want online, Apple, it wasn't just devices, it was experiences, right? Martin Luther King, he had a dream, it was a big vision. But then, I think on the faith side, I think Jesus brought a different vision to religion. He kind of did away with religion of the time and just kind of brought it down to a simple belief of just love God, love your neighbor. Like took the
Yeah.
10 Commandments, the 600 laws of the Old Testament, said, let's make this simple and follow me. And he took kind of a whole revolutionary startup idea of what faith would be and grew it from that same part. And he had a vision, that he cast for his disciples. I thought that was pretty interesting. So that was the first pillar.
Okay.
The second pillar, I think this is one that applies to like all leaders. I think one of the key differentiators of great leaders is how they communicate. Communications is a superpower, right? And so, I, humbly worked on all the ways I communicate, whether that's in writing, speaking, PowerPoints, whatever that might be, and trying to be an impactful leader. And I think when you look at industry, Stephen Jobs was a master of, communications, right? But I think what's interesting when you look at Jesus and his communication style, I'd argue he's the greatest of all time. And he sold with storytelling. He
Hmm.
sold with metaphors. He sold with visuals. He sold with listening. And, the storytelling, I think, is, really one of the more powerful ones that, science shows that storytelling stimulates a part of your brain that helps you retain and process things, right? And if you look at how Jesus taught through the New Testament, he did it through the stories, the stories like the story of the prodigal son, a story of a son who took his father's wealth and said, I don't want anything to do with you, went off, squandered his wealth, and decided when all things were, at the bottom of the world. Maybe I need to go back to my father. And the father, who in most cases would have said, hey, son, you blew all my money. Why are you coming back? Welcomed him with open arms. Now,
Hmm.
Jesus could have just said, hey, God loves you despite what you do, and it's okay. He didn't do that. He had a really good story to tell that. The other great story is the story of the Good Samaritan. When someone asked him, what does it mean to love your neighbor? And he went through a pretty extensive story about what it meant to be loving your neighbor, where the Samaritan, which was, you had someone beaten on the side of the road, and the religious order passed by this person, didn't help him, but his most, kind of rival, person in the community helped him, supported him, and went above and beyond. So he gave these examples to illustrate points, and I think that's one. The
Hmm.
second, he sold in, his concepts in metaphors, always he took complex ideas and made them simple. I'm the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I'm the good shepherd. He always talked in different ways. And so I think, to me, second pillar of communications, is just, it's such a powerful one for leaders to understand and unlock. And there's so much that, ironically, you go back to, Jesus and how he communicated, that anyone can take, and grow from.
Hmm.
The third pillar, and I think so there's quite a few on talent, and just because my last 25 years I've spent in the business of helping organizations find, recruit, and bring on the best talent. And so that's what we do. We do really cool senior level search work. Like we place the president of the NCAA to help reform, college. We work with Top Golf with their brought in their new CEO. We work with Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post to bring in a new leader. Like we work with, companies bringing on great leaders, and so we know leadership matters. But I think the industry side, some of the greatest leaders that you could point to, whether it's, Jack Welch at GE. During
Hmm.
his tenure, values rose something like 4,000%. And his leadership team underneath Jack Welch, he had these lieutenants he developed, that one became the CEO of 3M, one became Boeing, one became the Home Depot CEO, like he built great talent that then was able to grow. And I would say, it's an interesting one when you look at the third spear and say, Jesus. Most people say, what did Jesus do for a living? He was a carpenter. I'd say, nah, he was a recruiter. He really wasn't a carpenter, because,
Yeah.
and maybe the greatest recruiter of all time, because the first job he did is he recruited 12 disciples to follow him. He had no money. He had nothing to offer them. He had a nascent, new concept. And it was kind of like a startup business saying, hey, come follow me. And he brought on,
Yeah.
this is kind of what's interesting. When you're a startup business, you don't get to hire the most experienced, talented people. You have to find people with raw kind of potential, because you can't afford to get the people that are like, 20 years of experience. So he brought in fishermen
Right.
and tax collectors, and kind of a group of people that wouldn't be traditional, that you thought about as his lieutenants, but he brought on, and he did a pretty good job with that. So, I think selecting your team is kind of, you have to pick, the right people.
Hmm.
I think the next one, and I think, it's kind of interesting, on the recruiting side, he also, there's a lot of times in our business, you have to take your competitor's biggest star. Like in my business, we're recruiting talent from my competitors, and you go after the top talent. All organizations try to, recruit people from a rival organization. And Jesus actually did that. When after the resurrection, he had his 12 disciples, they were a little bit stalled, it was going okay. And he
Hmm.
decided to go recruit his competitor's biggest star, which was Saul of Tarsus, who was the guy actually persecuting the Christians and terrorizing them. And he had an encounter on the road, and he was a pretty compelling pitch to get Paul to join him, and ended up, Saul of Tarsus became Paul and wrote, a good portion of the New Testament. But you could look at it that, at that point, he recruited someone directly from the competition, which was, from the Jewish side, who didn't believe who Jesus was. So I think there's an interesting one on recruiting and who you bring in. Um,
Yeah.
that's pillar four.
Okay.
The fifth pillar, I think, is when you get a team, you have to really, cultivate loyalty. Like
Mm.
people work for people, not for companies. And so what do you do to create loyalty within a team? And so, through my career, we've done lots of things, which is spending time off sites, building relationships, making it personal with the team, knowing their life, knowing what their goals are and how you align with that. I think there's a Harvard Business Review study that says that 58% of employees would stay with their company longer if they felt trusted and valued and recognized. On the one of my favorite coaches, John Wooden, famous coach at UCLA, he had built remarkable loyalty within his team. And he was more than a coach. He was a mentor, a teacher. He helped shape character. And so, that loyalty, which his players all through life kept talking about their experience with Coach Wooden. And I'd
Yeah.
say, and you look at how did Jesus model that? He poured so much time in 3.5 years into his 12 direct reports. He lived life with them, had meals with them, he worked with them. And people probably don't like to say this, but he actually partied with his disciples. One of the first things was the wedding. They went to a wedding where there was lots of wine. His first miracle was turning water to wine, and so like he socialized. He had a
Mhm.
good time. Which
Yeah.
some people don't think about in the context of Jesus' leadership. And I think in his leadership style, certainly that loyalty was built through humility, through the servant leadership, all the
Yeah.
things it showed. So I think cultivating loyalty, once you bring on a team, that's not enough. You have to cultivate the loyalty of the team, uh,
Yeah. Well,
at the same time.
I have a follow-up with that. So what would you say in today's very like fast-paced business world, how can leaders make those values a priority?
Well, yeah, and I think it's especially challenging today when, business is conducted on Zoom. You've got remote workers. You don't have
Yeah.
a relationship in
Yeah.
the same way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't have learning in the same way. So I think there is certainly a paradigm shift that you have to think about. So, I mean, again, to me, it gets to you need FaceTime, you
Yeah.
need time together in settings where you build relationship that goes beyond the business side.
Hmm.
And that only happens, you can't, only so much you can do on a phone or a Zoom. And so
Right.
being
Yeah.
intentional about
Mhm.
offsite time, development time,
Right. Yeah.
kind of things, Emma, I think that's really what we've seen that works.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, then the sixth one, pillar six is capital. Like,
Okay.
so capital matters. I wouldn't have scaled my two businesses without raising capital. My first business, I grew, I took it public on the NASDAQ, which we raised a whole bunch of money, and then we scaled it, sold it to American Express. And it was because I had capital, I could continue to invest and hire. My second business today is private equity owned. We're in our second round of private equity. I brought in capital, I bought
Mhm.
15 businesses, I've
Mhm.
hired extensively, but it's only because I have capital. And without capital, you can't really scale things in a big way. It's very hard to do that. And so I think that, the pillar six, capital matters. I mean, if you look at all through, the stories of successful businesses, even Tesla, Elon Musk is an interesting story. I mean, he started the company early on. Most people don't know this, but it almost failed. It was on the verge of bankruptcy, but Elon invested 6.5 million of his own dollars in 2008 to pull it out of challenge. He had made some money at other ventures, and certainly today that's worth trillions. I mean, it's worth so much money. But without the capital he put in, the capital Tesla wouldn't be Tesla, right?
Mhm.
And so the third pillar, like how does that relate to Jesus? Well, you know it Christianity wouldn't have scaled without capital, both human capital, but also with dollars. And just putting it in perspective, the number that's estimated that's given to Christian faith-based organizations, $135 billion a year. Like
Mhm.
the 4 billion proclaimed Christians wouldn't exist without capital of donation that came into it. So I think it's a big topic in terms of, for any business to think about what is the capital I have to grow, whether it's a nonprofit. I work a lot with nonprofit leaders who are trying to expand their influence. It
Yeah.
comes down to, can they raise the money to be able to hire the team to do the things they want to do? And so it's a big part of success, I think, of any leader is you can only go so far without capital.
Okay.
And then the last pillar, pillar seven, is an interesting one. It's embracing no to find your yes. And I think it's probably an underestimated concept. But what I've heard all through my career is a whole lot of no's. When I took my first business public, we went 3 months of hearing no from underwriters. You're not the right size. You're not the right industry. We don't think we should underwrite it. Finally, after 150 conversations, we got one yes. That one yes led to a public offering, which led to then building the business, selling it to American Express. Same thing now within the private equity money I've raised. I've gone through lots and lots of no's. And I think
Mhm.
entrepreneurs especially stop too early on no's, whether that's getting new customers, whether that's asking for capital. You have to embrace no as kind of a success. You need 100 no's to
Yeah.
maybe get your yes. And so, I think there's lots of stories in industry that are pretty interesting. I look at, there's a story of a woman called Jane. It's a true story. She was a single mother, broke. She wrote a children's book. 11 publishers rejected it. The 12th rejected it. Someone finally liked it. It was the Harry Potter series, and she sold $400 million. And she would have stopped at seven
Yeah.
no's, eight no's, nine no's, right? But she kept going. And there's so many
Yeah.
stories like that. Even the story of, a skinny 5'11" kid who was a sophomore in high school in the Carolinas who tried out for his basketball team. He got cut,
Yeah.
went home despondent, thought maybe he'd give up basketball. He came back the next year. He worked harder. He made the team. That ended up being Michael Jordan. If we would have just said no, he wouldn't have been Michael Jordan, right? And so I
Yeah.
think this power of like a no is on your journey to finding a yes. And so, I think certainly Jesus modeled that in the fact that so many people said no to what he taught. It didn't deter
Yeah.
him. He also, the other side of no is, making sure your no is a no and your yes is a yes. And so, I think there's that element of like being clear about what you say. So I think, the power of no, I think comes across in both ways, in
Hmm.
working hard to get to your yes, but also in communicating in a clear way, knowing
Hmm.
what truth is and being able to be a good communicator. So that's kind of the seven
I like that
pillars
one.
just in
Okay.
general of like how they applied to my journey, things I drew from leaders. But interestingly, again, on the faith side, and I go back to whether you believe in Jesus as or not, you can look at what was built from nothing into something and say there's something to learn there. And
Yeah.
it's pretty powerful.
Having the impact it has
Yeah,
today. Yeah.
for sure.
Um, well, okay. So another thing that I think you've talked about is in your book is embracing tough decisions too. How, in your opinion, how do you balance decisiveness with empathy and leadership? Because that's another thing too, is making decisions and whether you should do something or not.
It's hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think that's a hard one. And I'd say, well, one of my favorite quotes is, again, from John Wooden, the UCLA coach, who said, be quick, but don't hurry. If you think
Hmm.
about that, like, so I take the approach like, hey, faced with a challenging situation, you need to deal with it, but you don't
Yeah.
need to deal with it in that moment. You need to pause, gather information, seek
Mhm.
wisdom from your inner circle, and then arrive at a good decision if it's an important decision. So I think sometimes leaders, when it comes to tough decisions, don't make them too quick, get all the facts, but don't wait too long because it festers, right? And then
Yeah.
use the wisdom of kind of what you've built around you.
Hmm.
So in my world, I'm fortunate. I have a pretty broad senior leadership team of like 8 people that make up my inner circle, and so big decisions we can debate, we can disagree, but
Together. Yeah.
it brings together insight to lead to a good decision.
Yeah. Okay.
The other side, kindness is tricky, and I always see that when you're growing a business, it's not always a straight line of growth. There's times you have to lay people off. There's times you have to say you're not performing, right? And so, but one of the great quotes I heard actually is from the CEO of Intel, Pat Gelsinger, talked about like if you're being a purpose-driven leader and you have to fire or terminate someone, it should not be a surprise. It's your obligation that they should know where they are, where they're falling short, and give them a chance to improve. So by the time you get to having to have that tough conversation, you've had the opportunity to express where they are in the journey. So I think to me that's been a good standard to say like, yeah, there's times you have to change out people on your team who aren't getting the job done, but
Yeah.
that's the flip side of that is being honest and giving them feedback is actually the right thing to do so that when you get to
Yeah.
that point, they may not like the decision or they may like you at the end of that, but they're gonna feel comfortable that you at least, gave them a heads up to the process of what needed to be done. That's kind of how
Yeah.
I think about it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that also reminds me that when you said feedback, this may be like really random, but with social media and everything, there definitely is a niche in social media, especially TikTok, where employees post interviews they're letting go interviews and they record it. And a lot of these companies like don't give them any feedback at all. They're just like, and like feedback is important, right? So
It
that's
is.
what I thought of. Like
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'd say the flip side of that, Em, I'd say, and I counsel young people in their careers, like, don't put anything on social media
that
that
is also true.
that would later on be viewed to get in the way of your career. Like,
That is also true.
which is always a tricky one, right? So if you
Yeah.
getting, employer could wrong you, they let you go, and then someone's interviewing you 6 months later and sees that you're a scorned, person. So it's like, to me, it's
Yeah.
like, make social media neutral if you want
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
career that it doesn't impact you. I know people are passionate about causes. It's like, be passionate, but I'm not sure that's your business persona. You need a kind of a
Right. Yeah.
persona that's different from your personal passions a lot of times.
Yeah. 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 We've talked about being a leader, but in your opinion, what does it mean to be an inspiring leader? How is that different from being a successful one?
Yeah, so I mean, leaders can be appointed and have authority, but not have followership, right? So I think,
Mhm.
someone could be promoted into a role, all of a sudden they're a boss, and the people don't embrace them.
Yeah.
And it's challenging. And so I think to be an
Yeah.
inspiring leader, you have to capture the mind and the hearts of the team you're working with. So again, it goes back probably to exactly those seven pillars. Like, what's the vision for that team? Like, are you investing in your team? Are they buying, are you creating loyalty in your team? Are you developing the team? Are you, casting the, so I think all the same things of like the pillars of leadership apply to a leader within a smaller setting. It applies to a mother or father and a family to some extent, right? I think there's that element that, and I've got three boys, and getting your family to listen to a parent, sometimes, authority is one side and inspiration is another side, right? So,
That's very
sometimes
true.
it's not natural to want to listen to parental advice. So you've got to think about, like, how do you inspire buy-in to what it is you're trying to get people to do? Because to me,
Mhm.
leadership is really influence. It's getting people to move in a direction you want them to move in when they
Mhm.
may not on their own get there. So it's not about authority, it's about influence. And if it's
Yeah.
influence, how do you capture their hearts and minds and connect to people at whatever level they're at? And
Yeah.
every person's an individual, so
Yeah.
it gets into the listening and knowing their goals and their visions and aligning it to your own vision.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good answer. Well, you mentioned family. What legacy do you hope your book helps others building in their careers, communities, and or families?
Yeah, so I mean, all three actually. I mean, I think it's, certainly on the business side, want to share just what I think is, the type of leadership style that people will follow that makes, business a better place. It's
Hmm.
also, I think, one of the legacy things that I spend time on is I spend currently in my spare time, which isn't that much, but I spend time mentoring and developing nonprofit leaders. I've seen this gap in the world of, especially faith-based nonprofit leaders that are passionate about what they're doing, but they haven't been through 20 years of formal business training. And so they're stuck in situations with people challenges, with capital
Yeah.
challenges, with all these challenges. So I've kind of gravitated towards helping these nonprofit leaders in development. So we've actually developed with a program called the 10X Leadership Intensive, where we bring nonprofit leaders into Park City for 2.5 days, where we pay for everything. We do leadership development, but the foundations of it are the pillars where we just work through helping them think about their own impact. So to me, it's like, if I can impact, six nonprofit leaders who are impacting thousands of people, that's the impact I can have to make, the world a better place and to have a bigger impact. So I think that one
Yeah.
is on my heart, is, really something that goes beyond the commercial side of business, is supporting the efforts of faith-based nonprofit leaders in a more meaningful way.
Okay. And what's one piece of leadership advice you wish you had known in your earlier career?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes, you know, you got to make hard calls when people are culturally not aligned with where you want to go. I'd say just in my first business, we pressure to grow, we went public, we had to hit numbers. And so there were times where behaviors were tolerated because
Mhm.
we were scared of losing out on the revenue impact of certain people and
Uh-huh.
caused pain and stress within the business.
Mhm.
And it wasn't consistent, I think, with how I would want to run the business. So I would just say you've got to make sure people operate within the structure of how you want your business to operate,
Yeah.
culturally, ethically, all that kind of stuff, and just have a hard line on making sure. And I think, as a younger leader, I think probably had too much tolerance for things that fell out
Mhm.
of that. And,
Yeah.
through, I think, just growth and experience, been able to say, hey, I don't want to do that. I don't need to do
Yeah.
make the hard call, even if it's expensive, but it ends up working out the right way anyway at the end.
So setting boundaries kind of within your business is, yeah,
Yeah.
good thing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and high pressure businesses, there's always cultural pressure, there's behavioral pressure, and so for
Yeah.
us, it's we have always pressure to perform, to deliver, and that causes internal kind of challenge. And so, just being clear about, hey, what's okay, what's not okay, and
Yeah.
being sure to hold to that standard, I think is it's easy to say, it's
Mhm.
not always easy to do when you're dealing with humans, and
Yeah, when you've had the like personal like connections and things, but you just know that it's not fit. It's
yeah,
not right.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. So when did you start writing your book and how long did it take you to complete your book?
Yeah, so about 18 months ago, and
Okay.
it kind of started from, I get asked to speak to groups on leadership, and so one of the talks I gave was around this leadership principles. And out of that talk, I had like three people come up and say, "This is amazing. You need to write a book." It's like I was kind of
Oh,
thinking
nice.
I'd written one book before,
Oh,
a
okay.
different topic, and it was a lot of effort. I was not really,
Keen on
I'm
it.
not I'm not an author. That's not what I do. I'm a business guy, but it kind of like, okay, this is received in such a way that the content is unique, and I got to go do it. So then
Yeah.
took probably 12 months, just because I'm working a 60-hour a week job, and and
Jeez.
dealing with all that.
Oh
But
my
I would
gosh.
do it, on weekends. I would do it on airplanes. I would do it on downtime, and but it was fun. I mean, this was actually easier than the first book to write.
Oh,
So.
good. Okay. And what was your writing experience like? Did you get writer's block? Did you have a difficult part of your writing process or?
No, I think that it was kind of fun. I mean, I had, kind of the framework of the pillars, and then it was just more research, right? Then it
Yeah.
was getting into saying, okay, I know my journey, but let me look at the business parallels, and then let me go in and study what I could pull out from Jesus's leadership. So it was actually a lot of fun to do the research part of it and just kind of
Yeah.
put the content together. So,
Yeah.
I think because I started with the framework of what are the things I thought that were attributable to the success that I've had that I wanted to share. And then finding parallels was, kind of a quest of research. And in today's world, Emma, it's easier to research and find things, which was fun, and just bringing together
Mhm.
like meaningful content and, trying to make it, a different kind of a read. So that
Yeah.
was kind of the process I
Mhm.
went through.
Mhm.
So.
Okay. And do you have a favorite part of your book that you wrote or a favorite section?
Yeah, I mean, I think the communication one, the section is really important. And just because I think, as and I from time to time go talk at universities to business students at a couple different settings. And I always think that, and I tell young students this, that yes, you need to be smart, you need to learn how to learn, but the people that get promoted then that are successful are the great communicators. And I've seen it many
Yeah.
times over. Like I was a B student at best, but I could communicate and I could persuade people. And then I've seen through the people in my organization that have been promoted, people that stand out, like it's how you communicate. And again, in every form that matters. And
Yeah.
the greatest successful folks are just amazing communicators. So I think,
Yeah.
I pour into that to say I think it's underestimated in terms of development of people. Like you can have lots of wisdom and you can have technical
Yeah.
talent and you could
Yeah.
stay stuck unless you're able to figure out how to connect to people, listen to people, build rapport with people, to present in a way that people say, wow. So I think that one, just universally for anybody at any stage, whether it's a parent, a nonprofit leader, an aspiring person in the business world, it's got impact to how they lead and inspire. So
Yeah. I feel like communication seems, yeah, like it seems like something that everyone can do, but from what you said, obviously it is like something like it can't, it may be taught, but not like, so what would you say about how someone can learn how to communicate better if they're not necessarily a good communicator, or is it more like you have it or you don't type
yeah,
thing?
I mean, it's, I don't know if I have the perfect answer. I've got a series of
Yeah.
books I recommend to young people. It's, how to win friends and influence people. There's a great
Yeah.
book by a gentleman, Chris Voss, who was a hostage negotiator for the FBI that would negotiate these tense situations. And he wrote a book on never split the difference on negotiating. So there's probably like 6 or 7 books that are on that. The other topic on communication, and I think we didn't talk about it, is and within the pillars, is just the power of listening. I
Mm,
think, and learning how to be an active listener is a power in
yeah.
itself that connects to people. And I think, we've done work in our organization of bringing in outside firms that teach active listening, the art of mirroring and understanding. And I think going back to the parallel of Jesus, I mean, he asked questions of people. He didn't tell people. He'd ask questions. People
Mm,
felt heard and listened to, and he would ask them, "What did you think I meant by this?" And so there's this element of communications. It's a broad topic, right? But
yeah.
listening sets the stage for connecting to someone. Connecting to someone sets the stage for influencing them. So I think it's certainly tons of content on it, but I think within the
Yeah.
leadership side, like, I mean, I think everybody, if you want to advance like that, you could spend so much time there to kind of advance, where you want to be in life. That's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, also in college, there's a lot of communication courses. Like I remember taking a communication course my freshman year. I was like, oh, this is kind of
Yeah.
weird. Like, why would I need this? But it honestly like really helps. So like
It
college,
does.
yeah,
Yeah,
courses.
presenting is important. I mean, started out early in life. I think in junior high, I was in journalism side. I'd go to writing contests where you had to go somewhere and you write an article. I thought I wanted to be a sports writer until I found out how much money they make, and then I didn't want to do it anymore. But I think that whether you're write, speak, listen, persuade, superpowers like being able to touch each of those in different ways, because there's that element that people receive information in their preferred way, right? There are people that are
Mm,
visual or audio or feeling, and so like connecting to their style with your style creates trust. Trust creates the foundation for you to be able to influence people, to be able to get them to be the to follow what you need done as a leader. So
yeah.
I think there's that part of it. I think there's a whole topic of emotional intelligence, and part of emotional intelligence is reading the room, right? I mean, you talk about, we get asked a lot of times, how do you measure EQ in a leader? But it's this sense to be able to understand people and motivation and communicate to them the way they want to be communicated to, not just your own style. So like
Yeah.
that is just such a rich topic that,
Very important. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
it's fun.
Yeah. And so what has the feedback been like from your book? Have you had any reviews or anything, or what's the feedback been like from colleagues and your family and
Yeah, no, it's been good. I mean, I think it's been, something that, I think provides a fresh look at leadership. I think entrepreneurs that have read it really like it because it provides a little bit of a template to building a business from scratch. I think leadership, I think I've had good feedback there. So I think, early stages, in terms of feedback, but, it's something that I think is serving as now a foundation of trainings that are going on, that I'm doing in my nonprofit work, and so I think it's got a lot of applications to help in the development thinking, whether you're doing it individually or in a group. So
yeah.
really good reviews so far. People that have enjoyed it. It's light. It's not written. I'm not an academic. I'm a business guy who's practical and try to bring to life a few stories through there that just get people to think differently and about
Yeah.
leadership. So,
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
like just the greatest hits of leadership as I see it. I haven't done anything groundbreaking other than trying to pull together the best wisdom I found that's out there into my own context.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see your book being very like inspiring and motivated too, in the sense that you said it's light, like if you need to focus on a certain pillar, then you can go to that section. And then also having it being like, a story with research as well. I think that's like a great combination as well. So I could see it being
Yeah.
like, super motivating for people to
Yeah.
read. Um,
I'm hoping it will be. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I love talking about it. I love, in terms of, speaking on it. I hope the book is a good complement to, people having something that can just, inspire them to be better every day at the things they're doing.
Yeah. And what advice would you give a writer that is wanting to publish their own book?
Well, yeah,
You are an author, so
yeah, I mean, again, if it's something like, instructional, I think you need to have a voice and something unique to share. Like that to me
yeah.
is, that's the people that, yeah, so what is your unique angle to an issue that you can share? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know in terms of, the fiction side, but on the nonfiction side, like, if you've got something to share that's unique and interesting and you have an audience that wants that, then share it. And I think a book is a good platform to do that. I see it as part of a platform of communication, with a speaking, training, a book can complement that. But I would say, you almost need you need the life experience
Hmm.
and probably the credibility to then be able to share wisdom that people are hungry to learn. And I just found that, I couldn't always meet with people one on one to help them for 3 hours. Like, I have a lot of
Yeah.
requests at time, but this was a way to leverage the same kind of giving back in a way that
Yeah.
supports development in people. And, it's been, for me, that's been rewarding. So I think if that's, depends on your motivation. And I didn't write a book to make money. In fact, all of the proceeds I'm pouring back into my 10X leadership work I do with my nonprofit group and using that as kind of a vehicle to continue to pour into leaders. So it's more of a passion project for me. It's not a profit project.
Yeah.
Um,
And what was the first book that you wrote? How is it different from this one? I'm just
it's an
curious.
interesting one. So it's a book. It's a book called Oddly Unjust. Now
Okay.
this Oddly Unjust is the story of the proof of faith through the lens of the O.J. Simpson murder trial. So craziest concept, but I was always growing up. The O.J. trial bothered me. You had a guy who you had timeline, DNA evidence, scientific evidence, everything lined up. How could the
Hmm.
jury of not convicted him. And the odds, I'm a mathematical minded guy. Like I applied odds to each step of the way. Like someone who had this window of time, someone who had that, the scientific evidence, the blood mass. And if you put all that together, it's like, 50 billion to one, he didn't do it. But a
Hmm.
jury didn't want to believe it. Well, if you look at faith through the same lens, and I
Hmm.
looked at, what's the proof that there even is a God? What's the proof that the Bible is actually accurate? What's the proof that Jesus actually existed? What's the proof that prophecy within the Bible came true? And if you apply the same methodology of just like the odds of all that being randomly true, it's like 1,000 times more likely than the OJ one that it's actually true. So it's kind of a layman's story of like why I think faith mathematically makes complete sense and within the
Hmm.
weaving of the story of the troubling
Interesting.
O.J.
Okay.
Simpson story. So that
Okay.
that was kind of the first book.
Okay. Well, what are your professional or personal goals for this year? Do you have anything exciting coming up with your book or anything just in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're excited about what's going on in CRG. Our company is growing into the seventh largest global executive recruiting firm in the world. We're raising more capital. We're growing, buying companies. So that's we're on this quest to build something really special and been doing that for a lot of years. So that's going on. I am excited to continue to talk and share on the book. So I think in terms of my goals for the year, it's to get out and be able to share in group settings more about the pillars and be able to pour into people in that way. So I think it's setting the stage for when my business career winds down. I want to be able to pour into leaders in a way that's giving back. I feel like I've been blessed and lucky, and for whatever reason, things have worked out for me, and I want to find a way to pour back into others. And so, kind of,
Mhm.
the book and my time is setting the stage for what I'll do post retirement in terms of time to help support leadership. So, just kind of in that phase of going hard, but planting seeds for what will be next right
Okay,
now. So,
cool. Cool.
yeah.
And where did you go to school? I'm just
I
curious.
grew up in California. I went to Cal
Oh,
State
nice.
Fullerton. Yeah, spent
Oh,
30 years in California. Then I moved to New York. My wife is from the East Coast, spent 30 years in the New York area, raised my family out there, and now I split.
oh, very different.
Yeah,
Very different.
I'm in Park City in the summer, in Utah, and Palm Beach in the winter. So I only go where the weather's good now. So
Oh, that's nice.
perpetually sunny. So.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Is there anything else that you wanted to tell us today or mention?
No, it's great to be here, Emma. Thanks for
Yeah.
the interest in the book. And again,
Sure.
my hope is it's helpful to anyone in their journey of leadership, influence development, and doing it in a way that's, I think, meaningful in the day-to-day endeavors of leadership. So hopefully, it accomplishes that for people.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I think your book is great and has a lot of, expertise and leadership advice, and I wish you well with your book.
Thank you, Emma. Good being here
Thank you.
today.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
And if you listening liked Larry's book, you can head to westbowpress.com and purchase it through the online bookstore. It also is available on Amazon and Barnes& and Noble. So if you want to get it through that route, you can do so. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.